Hello, Brainiacs, and welcome. This is the first Broken Brain Book Club. This is a recording of the book club that we had just last night, where, assuming that I get this out the next day, which let's pretend I did, even if I didn't. The novel that we reviewed was A Stream to Follow by Jess Wright, who is a psychiatrist and author. You've heard him on the show before. If you listen to every single episode, then obviously you have heard him on the show a couple times. He is a pioneer in the area of computer-assisted cognitive behavioral therapy and trauma and other stuff. And this book is about Bruce Duncan, who is a fictional World War II doctor that has returned from World War II. I'd like to do this on a regular basis, at least every month or two. And I am entertaining ideas now for our second book club. So if you are listening to this, then definitely reach out to me. Let me know. There will be an open link each time that we have this promoted on our social media. Make sure that you're following on Twitter at Break-A-Brain, on Instagram at Brainiacs Ahoy. That's what they had available. Or Facebook, facebook.com/Break-A-Brain. Those are some of the places that you can follow, or just listen right here, and or do whatever. All of them, all the time. Delete all other web pages from your favorites. Without further ado, let's get into the book club with those that are joining and those that were listening in silence as well. Love y'all.
Recording
Bye.
in progress.
Got it started up. As we were just saying right before I hit record, this is a new experience it's the Broken Brain Book Club, the very first that we've held, and it makes it a half book club, like a book club anybody may have gone to, and certain like half podcast episode as well. A lot of you listeners who have shared, thank you for reading the book. Thank you for purchasing the book. Those of you that have done so as well, because that's a good thing. I just will probably agree that that's a good thing. And we're going to talk about it. And those of you that couldn't be here, but are here in spirit with us and who will be listening to this broadcast as it goes out on the podcast feed, probably tomorrow is when it will go up from when we're recording as well, so that everyone can do that. Also should be available on the YouTube channel. I don't think I mentioned that in the intro. YouTube/Broken Brain as well, for those that would like to see the video. That'll be available there as well, and links on our social media. So anyway, I want to go around and introduce our members of the book club who are present today. I'm Dwight, of course, the host of the podcast. Everybody listening, if you don't know who I am, this is your first episode. Maybe a weird one to start with, but that's who I am. And we're going to go, let's have our readers introduce themselves, and then we'll give Jess a chance to introduce yourself, as you've been on the show before, but to talk a little bit about maybe what, how things are going with the book, because there's some exciting things going on there. So let's see, who wants to start? I would point, but you guys can't tell who I'm pointing at in the Zoom windows.
Well, I guess I will start. My name is Robert. This is my first time doing this with you, which is fun, although we've done other things. My wife, Bree, is part of the Let's Chat network and has helped out with all that. And I'm just really happy to be here.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. I'm Ashley. I have done a podcast before, but I've never done a book club / podcast, but I'm an avid reader and I enjoyed reading, new and exciting work. I feel like it's very important for us to be supportive of our writers and to keep being ferocious readers and writers and discussing stuff like that. I think it's really good for us as a society to keep doing that. So good job. And I look forward to doing this again in the future.
Thank you, Ashley. And is this published? Is it Spark Press? Is that the name of your publisher?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things that's exciting about that is that you have gone, through a publisher, which is the traditional process. Obviously, it's not a self-published, but it is an indie publisher, which is very exciting and cool, I think, because obviously a big supporter. We've had indie booksellers and things on the show, and so I think that's very cool as well. So Yeah, tell us. Can you update us a little bit on how things are going with the book, Jess?
Sure. Well, first, Dwight, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to be the very first guest on your book club. I can't say that I've done very many firsts in my life, so this is something that I'll always remember this.
Oh, thank you.
And it's good to be with you, Ashley and Robert, and listeners that may come on later. So the A String to Follow was published in late April, and it's done very well. It's been getting great reviews on Amazon and other places through various reviewer sites like Reader's Favorite and some others. And I just heard just a couple of weeks ago that it won the first award that it's been entered into. It has a few other ones that are still pending. This is an EPI award, which is for independent book publisher produced books. And it won a silver medal. So I was really pleased to see that. In fact, my wife joked that they sent the silver medal in the mail. And she said, well, you can put this around your neck like you won the Olympics or something. But I have so far ceased and desisted on that plan. I guess I should have put it on for tonight.
Yeah, we get a podium.
That would have juiced up your broadcast a little bit.
Well, Ashley, you can sing the national anthem. It's for whatever country you're from, usually in the Olympics. So
no, I am not going to sing the national anthem tonight.
Oh, that's great.
I'll do a lot of things in your book club, but not that.
Yeah. Congratulations. It's really good. And I can say, having read the book, of course, it very well deserved, I think. You touched on a lot of different things and I think very interesting things within the framework of this story. It's the kind of story, I don't know how everyone out there feels about historical fiction. One of the biggest risks when you approach a historical fiction as a reader is that it can be some of them are a little dry. I'll just put that out there. And to have something that you were able to find a way to bring about a very exciting like story as well as interesting and then a really exciting protagonist. I'm sure we'll get into that about Bruce.
Well, thanks for the comment. One of the oddities of this whole thing is here's a psychiatrist writing a novel. And if we look on the list of authors of novels, you can't count a whole bunch on a couple hands that are psychiatrists or psychologists or other therapists. Perhaps some of you know others, but I think I belong to a fairly small club. But I really enjoy it, and to me, I thought that my years of I'm a psychiatrist, does a lot of therapy too. I've written a great deal about cognitive behavior therapy. I teach it, and I've done research on it, and I use it in my clinical practice along with other kinds of therapy also. And I thought that, I've talked to a lot of people and heard a lot of stories, and have gotten to know some people in a lot of depth. And if I write a novel, maybe I have a sort of an angle on understanding characters and trying to bring them to life that my work as a psychiatrist might have informed. And I hope that came through to some extent, that the characters, you can get a feeling of what the characters are going through.
I certainly felt so. And anybody chime in whenever you want with other comments too. You had mentioned before when you'd been on the show too, that you worked as an Army doc as well.
I did,
right?
yes.
With your own experience.
I was a psychiatrist in the military. Yes.
Yeah. So to bring that perspective, I think was quite powerful. Of having seen some of that exact same things, right? I mean, more mental injuries, I guess. Although probably talking to people who've been through a lot of physical trauma as well.
Right. I decided to write a story about a surgeon who was right at the battlefront, which I thought was a untold story, at least in recent novels, recent fiction. Mm-hmm. And that's I got off on that. And then I spun the whole tale around the story of Bruce Duncan. Yeah.
It hit me that this would make a great episodic kind of fiction. If when the movie deal comes in, I would just say, think about this, it reminded me of a Masterpiece Theater, except it's set in the U.S. And I don't know I don't know what our version of a Masterpiece Theater is in the U.S. based story. I guess it's what now, Prime Video series or Netflix series.
Yeah. When you think about small town America and the so-called best years, which were the years right after World War II, when there was this aura that there's been a great victory and the whole country had come together, and the soldiers that returned were treated in a different way than the ones that came home from Vietnam. And perhaps there would be some kind of a series that wouldn't be masterpiece theater, but it might be maybe closer to All Creatures Great and Small, or something like that.
Something like that is my thought.
Take it into a rural era when families were probably a little closer. At least they lived closer together than they are today, in most cases.
I felt like you took on a little bit of the perception of it being the good old days, a little, as far as it's not all roses and sunshine. As maybe sometimes we might say, the greatest generation, lots of good things happening back then, but you didn't romanticize it. There are
a lot of myths about that generation. The soldiers that returned looked like they were in great shape, but inside they were having a lot more trouble than they let on. I can't tell you how many people have read the book talk about their parent or grandparent who were like Bruce and Glenn, that they suffered in silence, if you will. And we still see that a lot with trauma, don't we? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was going to actually mention that my grandfather my mother was born in Park Ridge in Kentucky, and my grandfather helped design the atom bomb.
Oh my God.
And so he was a Kentucky mountain man from Pikeville, Kentucky, and wore plaid like flannel every day of his life. And he actually his family was Scottish, and they came over, and he knew the Hatfields and McCoys. He was like 3, was underneath like a bar stool when they were having a shootout. We just don't have those kind of stories anymore. I mean, we have like 9/11 and things that are horrific, sure, but just hearing about the foundation of the country from him and from my grandmother and from my mother. My mom and dad were born in the 40s. And my dad was actually in the Navy between Korea and Vietnam, and was an ear, nose, and throat assistant, and drove a ambulance and got boys off the field. And I didn't know how much trauma he had. My brother heard more about it because he didn't want me to know how bad it was. So it's just, I definitely identified with a lot of that in the stories.
Yeah, as therapists, that's one of our big projects, isn't it, Dwight, to try to help people tell their stories and to unburden them and to break out of patterns of avoidance where they're going through some kind of rituals or behaviors that sort of press it away, but it's still there. It's eating at them all the time.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say it's refreshing because, I'm relatively young, at least I think that I am, I remember that I'm in my mid 40s, but
I'd say that's very young from my perspective, Robert.
but when I was growing up, PTSD and talking about trauma, it was taboo. It was just something that you didn't do. So my grandfather suffered in silence a lot. And I really empathized with that and just getting it out. And yes, sorry, that's what you said.
Do you think it's changing at all from any of your perspectives that people are more likely to be open about having some kind of mental illness or PTSD or depression or whatever it might be?
I think so. I have talks with my children. About letting us know what they're going through and how they're feeling. That they shouldn't be ashamed of their feelings. And I actually just got phone calls over the weekend from state health organizations that they're funding just health, mental health, wellness. And trying to understand what the populace is going through. So,
Wow,
that's a start.
Well, that's encouraging.
I think one of the things that I've found really exciting is actually in media. Sometimes on the show we'll profile a lot of pop culture things, sometimes TV or movies. And one of the things as we'll pick. It's like we'll pick something like, oh, let's talk about, the show Moon Knight just came out. Dissociative identity disorder. Pretty straightforward because the character has that, right? And so, but one of the things that I find is almost, it's funny because it's not really a challenge exactly, but it's like, oh, well, this movie, what's it about? What's about trauma? What's this one really about? What's really about trauma? They're using trauma in storytelling much more effectively than I think we ever had before. And I would put A Stream to Follow definitely under that umbrella of using trauma as a powerful storytelling piece. And it's funny. I think that also helps people to talk about it and think about it.
I'm glad you said that, Dwight, because one of my motivations for writing fiction was to tell the story that I guess I've been telling in my medical writing, but in a different way. It was maybe more engaging and more interesting than sort of a dry tome of writing another medical book. I've done a fair amount of that, and I think that it was time to shift gears, if you will.
I imagine it was probably felt kind of like a relief to you too, to be able to actually explore the character's feelings without having to think of it on the couch with the shrink hat on. You're able to actually flesh out those emotions and responses and hear everybody's conversation at the same time in your head and on your paper. That must have been a great joy.
Thanks for making that observation, Ashley. That's really quite true, because in medical writing, I'm always thinking about, is this entirely accurate? Is this supported by the medical literature? Do I have a citation from research studies on this? And doing that, it's really constrained you. Whereas the fiction writing, I was really able to identify with the characters and feel, I think I was able to feel what they were going through sometimes. And I had an outline for the whole book, but I can tell you that when I got into it, sometimes the story sort of, it wanted to tell itself, and I got into it and let it go. One of the things that sometimes people have said about the book is they liked it because they weren't sure how it was going to end until the very end. And I wasn't sure either. I was trying to find out where I thought the story would go. And I had a few people reading it, including, I don't mind me telling a personal story. My mother, who was a World War II vet, in the sense that she supported my dad, who was a World War II vet and lived through it, was a consultant, if you will. And she lived to be 101. She was pretty amazing. She was actually cognitively intact and really sharp until almost the very last couple of weeks. And she liked to read it and give me feedback about it and tell me if she thought it was authentic. And having that experience with her was very interesting for me to get that kind of feedback. So I've had other people read it as they go along. They try to identify with the characters. If you don't mind, I'll tell one quick story. Then maybe we want to get to some of the discussion points so we can have everybody ask questions. But
absolutely,
when early on in writing the book, my mother told me, Jess, you need to put some sex in this book. So I laughed a little bit because she was an inveterate reader. She read everything. And I said, well, yeah, that's probably right. And I said, if I write it, will you read it? And she said, sure, I'll read it. And I said, okay. And so when I wrote the first scene that had any kind of intimacy in it or romance or whatever, I wrote it in 3 versions, almost like hot sauce: mild, medium, and hot. and when I gave it to her, I says, Mother, would you like to read the mild or the medium or the hot? And she said, well, I'll take the mild. and she gave me the approval for the mild. So I think it ended up sort of being between mild and medium. And the hot was on the cutting room floor.
Director's cut.
Yeah, well,
something to save for.
But getting back to Ashley's point, it was really enjoyable and transporting in a way to get into characters like that and let them go where they felt like they should go. I really enjoyed that part of it.
Well, you bring up, you had shared some discussion points, and these are actually some book club type of questions too. So I'm excited for that. I'm not vamping exactly, but I'm just trying to hit. There we go. I think I figured it out how to share. There we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Did I cut anyone off? Okay, there we go. Yeah, I couldn't see where you guys went either. So that's a little bit of the Zoom. It's great for the audio medium part. Those are just listening to that. And so let's get into some of this. And I thought maybe it'd be good for us to share a couple of these things. And we can certainly, since we have the benefit of having you here, Jess, we may rephrase some of these towards you, and we'll see maybe we'll try what we think first and see. You can tell us if we're right. Yeah.
I think the book clubs and book clubs that aren't online like this are part of a podcast. They're typically a discussion among the participants.
Right.
And it's supposed to stimulate some discussion.
Sure. And I'll say, too, for anyone, let's take turns reading these. And if you want to add to or modify those ones that you're reading or anything, Ashley and Robert, feel free. So let's see. Would you do you want to start reading one, Robert? Do you want to read the top one?
Sure. Bruce Duncan, the main character in A Stream to Follow, and his brother Glenn experienced PTSD after horrific trauma in World War II. What did they do after the war to cope with PTSD? What made it worse, and what made it better?
And, I'll throw out just a few things before I definitely want to hear, Jess, some of your thoughts on how you approach that. But one of the things that hit me, it was funny, it followed through, too, right off the bat. And maybe I'm thinking like a therapist, but, Glenn greets Bruce off the train, and he's like, so we got a party, And I'm like, oh, drinking seems to be pretty key in Glenn's, I'm wondering. And it was interesting to see how Glenn was coping with alcohol quite a bit. Which obviously I think we could say the story seems to indicate that didn't make it better, his abuse of alcohol. And I thought it was interesting that Bruce did not. I think he has a drink or two in the story, but he seemed like he was purposefully steering away from it. And I don't recall if it ever out and out said that Dad was an alcoholic. He did hide liquor, and I can't remember if they said it, but he obviously had a drinking problem of his own. So I thought, one of the things that stood out to me was the use of intoxicants, which I'm sure was common, and also amongst culture, especially male culture, is often romanticized. For have a drink, just deal with it. Let's pour another glass. So those are some of my thoughts. I don't know if anybody else has the things they'd like to throw out. I thought it was interesting as well.
Mm-hmm. Did any of you see things that any of the characters did that seemed to help?
Not to take over, but again, with one thing with Bruce, I thought was interesting was that he would do almost kind of talk himself through when he was triggered. At least that's what I noticed. It seemed like he was doing some thought challenging there.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a little touch of cognitive behavior therapy in here, in that we get to hear some of the inner thoughts of some of the characters, so-called automatic thoughts, the cognitive therapists would call them. And in some cases, and many people do this naturally. They don't need a therapist to coach them on it, or maybe they need a therapist to coach them how to do it better or more thoroughly or whatever. But they do ask themselves some questions about the thoughts that pop into their head. Bruce did some of that. I don't know how many people have read how far in the book, but there is a scene on New Year's Eve at a country club where there's a dance, and there's going to be a fireworks display at midnight. And Bruce's inclination is to avoid it, which is pretty classic. Would be a triggering scene for any kind of trauma related to gunshot or artillery shells, things like that, which he experienced a bunch of. But yet he steels himself and he drags his brother out there on the patio at the country club, and he forces himself to actually watch the whole thing without drinking heavily and without shutting his eyes, without doing any of the things that the cognitive therapists would call safety behaviors. There are things that allow you to participate in it, but you're actually not.
I had written in my little notes app, I'm going to watch the fireworks in quotes. I thought, that's in cognitive behavioral terms, we might call that flooding, right? Except that, like you said, he didn't do anything to calm himself. He just looked at it, right? Pushed himself.
Yeah. One of the theories that comes out of cognitive behavior therapy is that one needs to break the pattern of avoidance. And avoidance can be subtle. Sometimes it's through these things we call safety behaviors, where you're actually participating in a feared activity, but you're really not there completely consciously. It can be somebody that has, for example, social phobia, and they go to a party and they immediately down 3 glasses of wine. And instead of trying to strike up conversations with people, they hang around their partner and let their partner do all the talking. And they say, well, yeah, I went to the party, so I don't have social phobia. But they really were protecting themselves. So the way to get over it is you need to fully face and feel and think and experience the situation over and over. Barbara Rothbaum, who wrote one of the really best books for the general public about PTSD and is a world expert in PTSD, says that the core thing about therapy is to talk about it, or write about it until you've done it enough. And I think that that's an ingredient of lots of therapies that help people with PTSD. So later on in the book, there's a scene, if you read it, you may recall this, where Bruce is with a woman that he's attracted to greatly, Amelia, the English heiress that's come to the United States to see what their relationship might hold. And they're fishing on a stream and they hear gunshots. And instead of shying away from that, Bruce does confront the perpetrator, who's a guy who's done some bad things to Bruce earlier in the book, and is really a dangerous character, fights him. But then afterwards, when Shorty, the bad dude, is subdued, he's actually shot off part of his foot, tied up in the back of a rusty old truck that was Shorty's, because Bruce's car has been shot up and can't be driven. Bruce begins to talk about some of his trauma, and Amelia encourages him to spill it out. And indeed he does. And I think it's a pretty dramatic scene where he talks about the thing that troubled him the very most about his wartime experiences. Wow. And he shared it with somebody who he could trust. Sometimes you do that with a therapist, you can do that with a loved one, but that can be a key to recovery from PTSD. So I was trying to tell in an engaging story, throw out a few little tips about things that people might be able to do or help a loved one to do about trauma.
That reminds me of a point I was going to ask about, but I think, Ashley, you had said you had something.
Yeah, a couple of things. My dad was a reserve police officer, and he used to take me downtown during the Memphis in May fireworks display. And I don't think my mom knew that he was taking me all the way down there, because he could get behind, and he would go up in the parking garage. So we avoided the crowd and we could see this display from a safe distance inside of a parking garage. And to this day, I don't really like the sound of fireworks. That makes me cry. And I don't know if it's because of my dad or because it's just so big and beautiful, or the sounds, the percussion sounds. When he passed away, he asked us not to use this 21 gun salute. And I was so relieved. And we never discussed why I didn't want to hear guns shot off. We just never discussed it. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things that was like a mutual understanding between us. And then the other thing I was going to say, I read this scene where he was talking about how, and the young lady said that it was war. The Nazis, he did what he had to do. And I thought it was really compassionate. And for people to read that sort of thing, it makes the
the narrator and the reader the same to receive the same balm of understanding. Even if they haven't had that exact experience, it gives them the calmness to hear the forgiveness and to move forward. And I think that is very important in those kind of books.
Yeah, thanks so much for that observation, Ashley. I mentioned Barbara Rothbaum earlier, and it's a small little book. It's very valuable. It's called PTSD, What Everyone Wants to Know. She actually has a list of things that she recommends people don't say to sufferers from trauma, and things she recommends they do say. And as you can imagine, some of the things they should say are, it wasn't your fault. I understand. I love you no matter what happened. And there's some things that you shouldn't say, like, well, why didn't you just do X, or why didn't you just do Y, or gee, why don't you just forget it and go on with life? You can't do anything about it. It's water over the dam. Just forget about it. So those things are not going to work very well.
There's a quote that I had marked here that I kind of wanted to share. Maybe this is a good time. It's when Bruce is talking to Glenn, and Glenn is saying he's got this his girlfriend who's they're about to even get engaged, and he's worried. He's like, well, she hasn't seen the darker sides of me and my trauma and things. He didn't use the word trauma, but he says that, and he's asking Glenn, what could I do? Should I leave her to spare her the problems and things? And so, and Bruce basically asks him if, here, I'll just read the bit here. He said, she hasn't seen anything like what happened at lunch today with Sarah. The mood shifts like Dad had. She doesn't know about the nightmares, the pain from the burns. And then it's Glenn speaking. He says, well, not yet. And Bruce answers this, which I love. He said, you just answered your question, Glenn. Tell her about your problems. If she wants to keep the thing going, she'll say so. It could be worse for her to have you walk away than to help you fight the ghosts. If she wants out, at least she'll have company. Me. And I think that's a great example of a great thing to say, is like, talk about it. Give her a chance and a choice to help you, because she may want to help you. But then he also adds, regardless, you've got your brother, you got me, I'm here, and we'll be here together. I thought that was a powerful example of that. Yeah. Let's, I wanted to, let's see, this comes up in a different question, so maybe we'll get into that in a little bit, of one of the coping skills that I thought was interesting. But let's read this, this second one I think is interesting. Ashley, do you want to read the second bullet point there?
Sorry, it minimized. There we go. What do you think the author meant to convey with the title "A Stream to Follow"?
We'll take a shot, and then we'll ask you, Jess.
Yeah, it's a bit of a guessing game here.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
I actually will tell you what I meant with it, but
yeah, right. No, what's any thoughts first before we get the real answer? Anyone brave?
I mean, there's the metaphorical. I always think of, when I see the word stream, I actually think of the phrase stream of consciousness, and along with the actual physical representation of the stream and the fly fishing. So just, I don't know how to put it into words. But for me, it's that stream in your brain, and how to get through his experiences. And I'm sorry, I'm flustered. I can't think now.
I think that's, you're onto a lot of it. So that's really good. That gets us started.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page as you, Robert, about the kind of obviously, we have the fly fishing metaphor in the rivers. And I really love, also, I grew up in Pennsylvania, so I really love the descriptions of the rivers and the things as he goes out into that. But it made me think, as you were just saying, Robert, it made me think of like our cognitions and our thought patterns, right, in our brain. And
That's the word I was looking for.
yeah, where they take us, right? And sometimes, I mean, that's the bit when it's unhealthy that we have to try to interrupt instead of just kind of follow versus which way do we follow? I don't know. That was what it made me think of.
Well, I'm just going to say that I love water and the metaphors of water and actual water. And I live in Memphis, so the river's kind of a big deal to me. But it says a stream to follow, which to me is an invitation, because it's not just a stream to get water and to revive yourself and to perhaps survive, especially if you were in a war combat situation. You would need to be near the water, and it was always hot zones. And a stream to follow means follow me out to safety, get out of this, out of the stream, just keep going. So that's kind of what I thought. Like, you just have to keep going, because the whole story was about picking everything up and just keeping going forward.
Well, this is really interesting and fascinating. And I think all of you come up with things that are slightly different, but very intriguing. And maybe they were deep in my unconscious somewhere. It's tough to find a good title for a book. And I must say that I struggled a lot and came up with some pretty lame ideas in the beginning. Had a whole yellow legal pad full of ideas and would be driving and try to think of ideas and so forth and so on. And I obviously had to throw away dumb titles like Dr. Duncan Goes to War or something like that. Certainly wouldn't want that. I wanted to make it more interesting, make people think a little bit about what's this book all about. But I guess what I think that all of us are looking for a stream to follow, a way forward in our lives. They can be goals, they can be projects, they can be, as Viktor Frankl pointed out in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is one of my other questions here, finding a sense of meaning and purpose in life, and then committing yourself to that. And so we see in the main characters, they're all looking for that, aren't they? Bruce is in committing to this small town practice when he had other options, working through the thing with his dad about whether he was doing something for his father or for other people, finding a love of his life, to build a family together, and really making a commitment to the community and to the workers at the silica plant. So all of those things, I think, were through this guy, Bruce Duncan, into a dilemma of what choices is he going to make? Which stream is he going to follow? Of course, there are real streams in the book. There's the Test in England, where Bruce meets Amelia. There's Spruce Creek in Pennsylvania, where he goes fishing and finds great solace. We'll have a chance to talk about that a little later. There were streams during the war that were important to him. In fact, the book opens with a image, a flashback, really, to a frozen stream and a really tragic outcome, a part of his trauma. The other characters have to find their own streams to follow. I guess you could use the word path or some other metaphor for that. But when Dwight said it was metaphorical, yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I intended it to be.
Wow. I wonder if, for mine, when I read, I'm going to cheat and jump a little bit down because I wanted to bring up something you mentioned. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 6 bullet points down. And so the post-war battles that Bruce encountered centered on helping workers at a silica plant. This industry was a mainstay of the local economy, yet its workers are being harmed. What moral and practical dilemmas did Bruce, the workers, and the plant manager face that still exist in our modern world? And so, I look at that, and obviously there's a lot that we get into right away there. One of the thoughts, though, that I was wondering, kind of tying this in with the coping skills question, I felt like it was very interesting that Bruce picked this fight. And there's a part where he's being followed in the town by a young man, And I thought this was very interesting that the young man, just his nurse's kid, and he had a question about a rash and was embarrassed and didn't want his mom to know just in case it came from somewhere shady. And so he helps the kid out, but he's ready to jump this kid. He thinks he's being followed. He gets a rock. He's ready to cave in this kid's head or whatever. And then so he thinks to himself a little bit later, like, gee, why was I so scared when there was a person following me that I could, a small guy following me, versus like he's jumping right into this huge battle that could ruin him in the town with a guy who already hates him, who's very powerful. And it got me thinking a little bit about risk management and the idea of, which one's really dangerous, because he didn't really think much about getting into the fight until he was already started, it seemed. And then, of course, he did have to think about those dilemmas. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting contrast of that bit of like, oh, okay, I'm right back in fight or flight mode. I'm right on the battlefield. And then here's this other fight, and it's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thanks for picking up that small detail, Dwight. I was trying to, in that particular scene, to show something that's, I think can hit all of us. I think we all can get paranoid, can't we? And believe that certain things are likely to happen that are probably low risk to happen, that we may underestimate risks in other areas of our lives. And Bruce was falling into that kind of a trap. So he's a character that I'm trying to show a guy that had some moral standards and commitment and determination, resolve and so forth, but he has his flaws too, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. And there is one. And some people would say that he did not appreciate the risks he was putting himself into or the community into, or he was a bit of a crusader of some kind, and look what he could do to ruin the local economy. So I think there are some dilemmas there that still ring true. That industry, by the way, I did work in a silica plant myself. So I saw it up close and personal. I saw people that were in their 50s that were dying of silicosis, couldn't get their breath, just like the characters in the book. And I'm glad I didn't end up with that as a career. I was in college and medical school at the time, trying to make some summer money, but I could have stayed there and worked, I suppose. It could have been a good union job, but I would have been dead a long time ago.
I thought it was interesting that you also, that there was an indication of eventual like the recognition of the moral dilemma on the part of Lucas, who was the plant manager, which I think in a lot of these stories, a lot of stories that feature a villain, if you want to call him that, I guess what I'm trying to say is in what I would consider maybe a lesser approach would be to make Lucas a villain. Like he's just a villain. That's who he is. And, he's going to be like snidely whiplashing his way through all these situations, and at some point, part of the resolution was that he was like conflicted and felt guilt over what he'd done to protect the company.
Yeah, I wanted to make it more nuanced than the classic stereotyped titan of industry who doesn't even care about what happens to the people in his plant. He cared, but his job was on the line. The vitality of that industry, which was supporting many hundreds of workers, was on the line. And by the way, in that particular plant, it made the brick linings that made the blast furnaces in Pittsburgh possible, that made the steel, that made all the tanks and bullets and things like that for World War II and other wars, and saved our country, if you will. So it's certain industries are needed, but where's the balance?
Yeah,
we see that now with struggles on oil production and global warming, and another war going on in which we need to produce materials for it, and we need oil. We need to keep the cars on the road. We need to get to work, and where's all this coming from? And what's the pay? How do we pay for it? And how does society pay for it? So there are no easy answers.
And it's, I mean, the aspirational ethics there of saying like, well, life should matter more than anything, right? And kindness and all that. And it's like, but are any of us willing to forego the things that that are made, right? And say, are we going to stop driving? You know,
Exactly.
so we are part of it. And then what do we do there?
Yeah, we need steel and concrete and things like that to live in our modern society, don't we?
Yeah. It's tough. Those are some tough things.
Yeah.
Let's see. Before we go to the next one, Robert or Ashley, did you have any thoughts about that? I wasn't sure if I missed somebody unmuting.
I mean, I was going to take it in the global warming direction, but
Go for it.
You beat me to the punch. I mean,
sorry about that.
Oh no. I mean, I have a 7-year-old, so it's pretty humbling when he looks at me and says, "Daddy, you really should be recycling that." And I just, and it's the simple things and it's just wrapping your head around a world that you may not be here for, and what am I doing that should be changed for the future. So
I just go back to the title for a minute and comment that Robert's talking about a certain stream to follow or not follow, or try to figure out where it's going and what the implications of it might be, and then making choices, which is a very human dilemma we face every day.
I was actually going to talk about, unfortunately, we're all we're over a barrel when it comes to ordering things online, but down to the little people and how the consequences of big business. I just thought about those poor people in the Amazon plant that died in the tornado for no reason. It was like they made them stay in the plant, and the tornado was coming and they had warning, and they still were not able to get off the line. And that just is appalling to me. But, I still have to order things from Amazon. I have people all over the country that I send things to. And, I mean, it's a choice I have to make sometimes, not to go local and ship it or whatever. Every corporation has bad guys, unfortunately, and everybody, it just feels like, you're helpless sometimes.
Yeah. I just came back from a vacation. I was hiking in the mountains of Western North Carolina. It was really gorgeous down there, by the way. But I did run into another person that was staying at the same place we were staying at. And he turned out to be an executive of a large chemical company. And we got to talking, and he was very sensitive about their image and very thoughtful, really, and said that they knew what the risks were of the amount of plastics that people use and consume. And he was really quite an advocate for greatly reducing plastics that we don't need to use. For example, getting water out of disposable or recyclable plastic bottles. And I was really taken by this fellow who was, very much an advocate for wise choices on how we use the environment.
Really cool.
If many people would see him as the enemy because he got paid by a big chemical company.
It's interesting the cleverness people have. I guess plug this. It was a limited run podcast that has wrapped up now, but it's still available, called Mothers of Invention, where they talked about particularly women scientists who were advancing things to fight global warming. It was very fascinating to see what can be done, and yet also how hard it is to get people on board with the slightest inconvenience, and especially if it's the kind of thing that would really help. Let's see. I wanted to maybe hit on and you had mentioned wanting to go into this, I think, Jess, as well, the fly fishing question. And I wonder if, or talking a little bit about the fly fishing. Could we?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I think we're sort of winding down on our time, and we've been talking about lots of tough subjects, trauma, war, environment, you name it. And fly fishing may be a bit of an antidote to all that. At least that's what I thought when I wrote the book. I'd be real interested in and how those scenes were viewed by the readers, by people who've actually experienced the book.
The question, on here that touches it too is interesting to me because it says, what is the appeal of fly fishing for Bruce and Amelia? And then discuss fly fishing or other pursuits that can promote reflection and solace. And it's interesting to me. One thing I was going to say is, to me, the fly fishing is meditative. However, meditation itself, I would say it's one of the best kept secrets of mental health, and it's not really a secret. It's just something people don't like to do. There, a lot of times, many people, a surprising amount of people, when they try to do traditional meditation, transcendental meditation, which is very well researched to be helpful to stress, they report that it makes them either anxious or they just can't get there, or they even if they have some good results, they tire of it eventually. And so, but yet finding something, I work with a lot of people in my practice of finding ways to be meditative that aren't just meditation. For many people, it doesn't work unless they can do something. And I found that even reading the description, I'm not a fly fisherman, but I admire the pursuit, and it's something I'm interested in theoretically, and just reading about it was meditative a little bit. It was very grounding in like living in the moment kind of thoughts is what it seemed like. And I can see where that would help, not just with the ravages of the PTSD symptoms after the war, but it seemed like whenever there was a chance, even in the midst of the war, to be able to do that. I could see that being huge.
Yeah. I was going to say it, to me, it's kind of like fly fishing is one of those things that you can do, but you don't have to think about it while you're doing it. And I mean, one of my favorite things to do, and people call me crazy, is I love to paint walls. If somebody needs me to help them paint their house, I will go and paint all of your rooms, because I can sit there and I can paint, and my brain is not it's not focused on what I'm physically doing. So I can wander and think about what's going on in my life that day, or what I have to deal with when I get home. And it just gives me a breather. So I'm physically doing something, but my brain is a million miles away.
That's a great example, Robert. Of course, I grew up fly fishing and have done a lot of it. You could perhaps tell that from writing these things and wanting to weave it into the book. And I find it to be meditative and restoring and refreshing. Many things about it that are quite good for me personally, psychologically and physically. I can go and spend several hours in the trout stream and not catch a single fish and have had a great day. So it's not the productivity, if you will, it's the experience, or being so-called in the moment, which is a phrase that's often used in meditation. But there's also another element of the fly fishing in this book, which we might comment on, and there's a bit of sex involved with fly fishing here. So this is like a dream combo for fly fishermen. In fact, there was a book written several years, it's more than several decades ago. I think the title was Sex, Death, and Fly Fishing. And you can imagine that one had some philosophical twists to it. I think that the author was trying to say that these are some of the most profound things that humans can experience. I think maybe he was stretching it a little bit about fly fishing. But anyway, I think he was trying to make a point. But it does offer an opportunity for Bruce and Amelia to be together. In fact, that's where they meet, and plays a role later on in the book. That in all my days of fly fishing, I don't think I can count a day like anything like Bruce and Amelia had. But it is a bit of a fantasy, I suppose you might say.
It's interesting how that ties in with their ability to get away, if you will, right, and to be together.
Right. Yeah. They're simpatico about it. What makes a good relationship? That's it. I didn't put that into the question here, but we're trying to find out that along the way. Good relationships between brother and parent and child, and partners, and I do remember a triad of things that one of my old teachers many years ago in a marital therapy course said, and two of them made a whole lot of sense. And one of them is to be able to have a sense of passion or intimacy or whatever, and in a relationship. And another one was to be a best friend with that person, to enjoy doing things with them, to have some things in common or some things that you really like to do and be with them. And that certainly is true both for Bruce and Amelia, and Bruce and Sarah to some extent. That one doesn't work out, at least in this book. Some people think in a sequel, maybe there'll be a turn of events. But the other thing that Kurt Wolf, my old teacher, pointed out was that really great relationships, when times are tough, when somebody's in trouble or sick or it's really stressed or in crisis, being able to essentially lean on the partner, almost like that person was a parent when you were a kid, that could take under their wing and take care of you and support you and nurture you. And that role could be shifted, if you will, depending upon circumstance, was a feature of really good relationships. And I sort of think that Bruce and Amelia and Bruce and Sarah show that, and Bruce and Glenn to some extent.
Let's see, Ashley, you were going to say something? I think you're muted, Ashley.
Can you see the background behind me?
Yes.
Can you see? Yeah. Okay. That is my mother-in-law's lake that she had her house on, and we inherited it. And I don't fish, but she used to fish to meditate all the time. Absolutely loved to fish. And my husband has fished before, but I just like to be out there and see the water moving, and there's geese that come, and my son now lives over there and he feeds the geese every day. They're crazy, insane geese that he just feeds them cat food for like 20 minutes. They're just eat out of his hand practically. And all of that is definitely meditation. It makes me think of the movie Walk the Line, when Johnny Cash is trying to buy a modern fishing rod for the first time, and June Carter says, "Well, what did you fish with before? Just a stick and some string?" And he was like, "Yeah, pretty much." So they definitely connect over fishing, and it's such a romantic movie and romanticized too. But I just love that movie so much. And the last thing I was going to say, and this is kind of a niche, like nerd thing, but I'm a huge fan of anime and Studio Ghibli, and he always has moments of zen in his movies where it's just silent, like just beautiful music, and the characters are just being peaceful. And my favorite piece of music and my favorite example of that is from Spirited Away, when she's on the train and she's going through the water, and it's just gorgeous. Like the train is, and they're just sitting on the train, and you see the water in the background, and it's just gorgeous. And that is meditation to me, reading stories and watching those kind of beautiful animation and playing silly, like mind game things on my phone, or doing the adult coloring on my phone. All of that is meditation.
Well, thanks so much. Both you and Robert have brought up just wonderful examples. And this was really what I meant by the question, that I wasn't trying to infer that everyone should take up fly fishing in order to get mental health. I think it can be a thing that gives you balance in life. Don't we all need some place we can go that restores us, that gives us a sense of beauty or comfort or peace, of well-being? Sure we do. And I was trying to show that in this book, that our surgeon that came back from the war with lots of ghosts found a place where the ghost went away, at least for a little while.
And having a sense of work that's satisfying and a sense of play that's satisfying. And it's really interesting when you mention relationships, because his passion for fishing is both an individual pursuit and something he does. As we read in the story, he fishes with Amelia, he fishes with Glenn. I think he'd fish with anybody who wanted it. Which I had a neighbor years ago who that was actually how he loved to fish, all kinds of fishing, ice fishing, fly fishing, whatever. And that was kind of his way. If he had somebody he wanted to give a gift to, it was similar to Robert. You go paint someone's house. He would take them fishing, and especially if they didn't know how, he'd take them and teach them. And he loved teaching them how to fish. And so, yeah, they got that feel. And it touches into the relationships. One of the things that I think makes Bruce a very interesting protagonist is that he's very sincere in all his relationships. Even when he's ready to punch somebody out or something, he'll tell them or whatever. And then he comes back around. And with Lucas, for example, he still wants to save him, in a way. He has an interest in other humans, and he's just very genuine when he's with them, I think. And as you put it, he holds back because of the trauma, but he seems to just be genuine. Almost as we mentioned these movie examples, he almost kind of in a way reminds me of like George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. There's an element there of the guy who, he's just genuine with everybody when he's in front of them, which I think is a great strength of that character that people don't always mention, other than just he works hard. He's also very genuine. Well, let's see. I wanted to ask, as we're going up on time, when we have all these are excellent questions for the book, I wanted to ask Jess: is there a question that we haven't hit upon in these lists that you think is a good one to answer, one that you like to talk about?
Do you want to wrap up with a question that's not on the board here?
Oh, sure. It could be one that's not on the board. Or one we didn't read.
I guess the question might be: are you thinking of writing a sequel, and what might it be? I've had a number of people ask me that question, and I hadn't put it in the list.
Great.
The answer is, I guess when I started this project of writing fiction, I was, I don't know, naive or grandiose or whatever. Maybe I was having a bit of a mood upswing or something, and I envisioned it as a series of three, like a trilogy of early stream, midstream, and late stream, if you will. And I hope that I'll be around long enough to pull that off. I'm right. I finished another book, which is on different characters, and it's with my agent now. And I'm about a third of the way through book 3, another novel based on book 2. But I think I'm going to come back to Bruce, Amelia, Sarah, and Glenn for the next one. So we'll see how that runs out. And if any of the readers or the listeners want to give me advice, I'm most happy to have it, because I think those that have read the book might have a good sense of what they'd like to see in the future from these characters in this little small enclave in the mountains of central Pennsylvania.
I really like the alternating point of view kind of approach to sequels. I think that it can be very interesting to see a character that you enjoy move on, but it can also be, I think it's a little different and challenging in a cool way to see another character, like you just mentioned, Glenn, and seeing, where does he go from here, and what's he going to do with all his demons, and how's he working through things? I'd even, it's funny. I'd even, I don't know if this was a whole book's worth, but it would be interesting to see the way Lucas copes with, behind the scenes of Lucas's point of view fighting with the corporation. Is he going to pick up that mantle and really say, I'm going to try to change things from the inside? And because that's also a character that in his way, we don't know his background, but obviously there's the trauma of feeling the emasculation of staying behind when others go to war. And then also, hurt people, kind of lashing out at his wife and those in the community. And obviously, a series of events that could have killed the protagonist. But but at the same time, didn't mean for it to get that far. Flawed character. Anyway, so just seeing the different points of view of the characters here, I think would be, I'd love to read a Glenn book.
We'll stay tuned. I hope that you'll be able to have me back in a couple of years, and we can talk about midstream or something like that.
There you go. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you. Everybody for being here. Let's see. Let's go around. Ashley, Robert, is there anything that you guys want to mention or touch on before we're done for today?
I mean, we didn't get to the question, but I mean,
Go for it.
Mental health, I think, is something that's very important. It's something that's very important in my family. And I absolutely adore anything that promotes healthy mental health and a positive outlook and just being open about talking about it. So I just thank you. Thank you for writing it.
You.
Well said.
I was also going to say thank you for including me in the book club. I love reading, and I think that it's a very brave endeavor to put your thoughts and your feelings and your characters out there to be slaughtered by the readers or loved,
And reviewers.
Right. Oh yeah. My husband tried to write a book and he's still working on it, and bless his heart, I'm just going to leave that alone. Anyway, it's definitely a labor of love but it's true work, and people act like writers don't do anything, but that's ridiculous. Anyway, keep going, keep working. We support you. And I think it's very admirable, and keep singing in your choir.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do both.
Is there a place for people to purchase it that is better for you? Obviously, there's the more convenient avenues, but
your local bookstore, if you have an indie bookstore, can actually order it. It probably is not in the book. It's in bookstores here and there, but it's not in every bookstore. And you can get it on all the online booksellers.
Mm-hmm. But I'm with you. Yeah, people don't realize sometimes that an indie bookstore has access to everything. And the interesting thing is, you might even through the web. A lot of them. We had Deshanta Harris, who's the owner of Books and Crannies in Virginia, booksandcranniesva.com. I'll plug that because she's been on the show. And you can go on there, and if you order on there, it comes to you in the mail just the same, and you're supporting a local indie business.
And if you're going to be in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, not this Saturday, but the Saturday after that, from most of the morning, I'm going to be doing a book event at the Browse About bookstore there in Rehoboth Beach.
Oh, wonderful!
And it's a big beach day, so there'll be a lot of people hopefully coming back and forth. That, by the way, that's where Joe Biden's summer place is. So I doubt Joe will come by to get my book and have me sign it, but you never know.
If you're listening, Joe,
yes. Bring telescope pictures too.
This is even more obscure, but if you're in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, which is where the book is cited, I'll be at the Borough Coffee Shop from 10 to 11:30 on Saturday morning, the 30th.
What would be really cool though is if we could order it and you sign a copy and then ship it to us. That would be really cool, because I love signed copies, first edition books. I have several. That's a collector kind of thing that I would really enjoy.
Dwight, you can put up my email on the site when you go live, and say that if anyone wants me to do that, they can send it to me, and I'll sign it and send it back to them. Or whatever. We can figure out a way to make it happen. Okay,
we'll put it out there. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Awesome.
We try to do it.
By the way, I grew up going to Delaware when we were kids. I love Rehoboth Beach. Just plug for.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Beach. Yeah, our whole family will be there.
Crazy! I've actually been there too.
Sisters and cousins and uncles and aunts and everybody. Yeah.
Robert, have you been there? Are you the only one?
I have not been to Delaware.
Oh.
Sorry.
Road trip.
We'll all the way around it, but
it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
Yeah.
We talked about water, and you can get your feet in the water there, and the beaches are beautiful.
Awesome.
I'll be doing it here next week. This time I'll be at the beach.
Right. I want to add one more thing, and Robert, we can cut this I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you guys have been through a lot recently. I've been retweeting it. Do you mind? Could we share you've had some personal tragedy with your housing, and you guys have a GoFundMe because you've had to relocate and not been treated maybe fairly by your landlords. Could you want to share that?
Sure. So going into Memorial Day weekend, the weather was just warming up. We're here in South Carolina, and we were going to take the kids to the pool. And I went into our closet to get out their pool things, and I noticed that there were many items in our closet that were damp. which I found strange. So I started pulling things out of our front closet, and I noticed the entire back of our closet was covered in black mold. Come to find out that there has been a leak of some sort coming from our upstairs neighbor for some time. Shortly after noticing that, actually the day after we found that, we moved into a hotel so that our kids didn't have to breathe in the mold. We found it in the vents right above my 7-year-old's bed. And as soon as we moved out of the apartment, I went back in, and there were several holes in the ceiling where water had started pouring through. We lost just about all of our furniture that was in there, either from water damage or from mold exposure. And a lot of, since we hadn't planned on staying there, a lot of things were being stored in that front closet. I lost boxes of books, games, children's toys, all kinds of things. And that was 6 weeks ago. And we still have not been able to get the situation resolved with either the landlord or insurance.
So, if you want, and I know I've retweeted this before, but I can put that up on our Twitter at Break a Brain, and, I'll repost that as well. Is there a link that you can set up for your GoFundMe?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but
that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll put that up, and I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot, but no. I just wanted, it's another chance to share that, because you guys have, I will say, for those in the podcasting community, you guys have donated tons of social marketing and tons of advice and literal help in making people's ad decks and things for indie podcasts at no reimbursement for years and years, and so you're just good people. So, all right, just putting that out there, all right, everybody out there who has been able to join us and to listen to this, please, speaking of making suggestions, as Jess did earlier, open for suggestions for future books that we'd like to feature. We'd like to make this a regular thing on the podcast to profile some books that are just like this one. And I'm echoing Robert and Ashley here to say, please keep writing this type of thing. This is exactly what we need. And for those that want to shape the media that is out there, it's important to support it and to go buy this book and, buy it, read it. Doesn't cost you any time either to go over to Goodreads and click on that whole 5 stars, by the way, or anywhere like that to help to share it.
That'd be great. Sure.
If you can't afford it, you can tell people about it too. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.